This video has been produced in partnership with the upcoming dark fantasy novel Murder Baby and its author G.J. Stoutemore. It is the first book in the Knights of Sadira series, available in paperback, audiobook, and ebook. I will be narrating the novel's opening chapter, which introduces the story's protagonist, Rafi Okamoto, the last Knight of Sadira, as she begins a somber mission to the tiny prefecture of Tottori to confront a wayward protege. As always, links are down in the description should you wish to check out this amazing book for yourself. Enjoy. It was a beautiful place, a rolling orchard lined with pink, blossoming sakura trees. The soil was lush, deep brown even when tilled and drying in the sun. Rows of ceramic basins filled with the fresh harvest of Nijiseki pears offered travelers an unmistakable welcome to a place that time appeared to have forgotten. Green mountains, blanketed with mist, enveloped the borders of the tradition-laden prefecture, a place called Tottori that eschewed the trappings of electricity, automobiles, and anything that would disturb the tranquility of their lives. Set far from Kyoto and close enough to the sea to beckon a trace of salt upon an easterly wind, the picturesque refuge seemed like a dream, a slice of the divine offered to earth as a token gift. But beautiful surfaces hide secrets, and Tottori had plenty of its own. One such secret brought Rafi Okamoto down the village road, slowly walking the old dirt path. She did not hide her weapon, an ancient samurai sword, nor did she pay mind to the hushed voices whispering worry and rumor from behind half-blinded windows and semi-darkened doors. They spoke about her blade, ceremonial kimono, and sun-kissed skin, which sparked speculation about her heritage. They talked among themselves quietly, careful not to disturb her, and they were wise to do so, though they knew not who she was. Rafi paid them no nod, nor blink, nor a slowing of her stride, or change in her posture. The run-in had come far, travelled for 7 days to reach them, and her occasion could not be hindered. The orchard narrowed as she approached a small tea house, a quaint place of elegance that stood apart from the village's other simple structures in that it only masqueraded as minimal. Like the village it occupied, it was far more than it seemed. Rafi entered the tea house with inimitable stillness, like the eye of a storm. She was greeted promptly by a young man, offered a bow that she did not return, and was asked who she was to journey so far and so long to call upon the master of the house. Rafi simply offered her name, speaking so softly that the young man had to lean in close to hear her. As soon as the words reached his ears, his eyes widened. All the colour dropped from his face as he offered the most sincere of apologies. Then he ushered her to the most private room the old-fashioned trappings had to offer at once. The young man then took his leave, sliding the door closed behind him. The lights, tiny flames dancing in paper lanterns, burned low, illuminating the walls of the room. They were decorated with rows of ceremonial swords supported by metal hooks that rested beside paintings and other traditional works of art. The ambience was plush, subtle, and luxurious for so fashioned modest tea house. Seated on the floor upon opulent cushions, flanked by two armed men holding rifles, sat one such secret that Tottori worked so hard to conceal. Ren Shimizu, eldest son and first in line to succeed Hide Shimizu, boss of the strongest Yakuza clan in southwest Japan. Raffi stood before the crime prince in silence. "So," Ren said, clapping his hands together. His accent was straightforward, unlike the complex Kansai pitch that a true Tottori-born would hold in their tongue. "This is the infamous Raffi Okamoto. My father used to tell me such stories." Raffi said nothing in reply. Her attention hardened against the young Ren, and while her expression said very little, the lack itself communicated more words through silence than any reaction might offer. "He said you were of Suroda-ha, a protege of Lord Ashai," Ren continued, sipping a small cup of steaming tea. "It was you who cut off the Kumiko's head. Did you really lay in his bed linens next to his dead body until morning? Telling a young boy a story of a little girl bathing in the blood of a corpse is cruel to a child, but my father never told stories that weren't important. He said no one, not a soul in Japan or elsewhere, could cross blades with you." Raffi looked coldly, dispassionately. The guard to Ren's right seemed to take exception.
"You will kneel before Boss Shimizu, or I shall teach you a lesson in manners."
Ren held up a hand to silence him. Now, there is no need for that. We stand in the presence of greatness. Raffi Okamoto, the blade of Kinokiba, Aiko, and Sachujin Onino Akashan, the murder baby. Do you know why they called her that? The guards did not answer, a credit to their training. Ren smiled. She was said to have killed 10 Yakuza men in a single night at all of 15, even before my father's time. My grandfather stood in the Yakuza court the night his grand Kumiko was killed by his prized child guardian. He lived and died, afraid the murder baby would come for him too. His gaze drifted from Raffi's dead stare, lingering as they slowly traced down her robed body before they settled on the protruding hilt of the ornate sword at her hip. "That is a beautiful sword." Ren took another sip of tea, and his leer thinned as he delicately lowered the cup onto the china set upon an ornately decorated bamboo table. The two armed men behind him shifted uncomfortably. "You are not Raffi Okamoto," he said dangerously. Unmoved by the chill in his disposition, She made no sound, offered no move, nor brandished any indication of reaction at all. Nothing. The young-looking woman was still as stone. I summoned the famed blade of Kinokiba to take care of a raider, but your attempts to deceive me now supersede that particular nuisance. When I was told you were just a girl, barely more than 20, Ren said softly, a quiet menace creeping into his voice, I knew you could not be her. I don't know how you came by that weapon, but you wield it as a fraud. Your lying has offered me an insult I cannot let pass. I did not come here to answer your call. Raffi's first words were barely audible, so hushed that they nearly disappeared in the tension hanging on the air. Nor am I interested in assisting you with your raider. The two burly men behind him clutched harder at their guns. Raffi didn't look at them. She simply eyed Ren Shimizu passively. Oh? Ren gave an amused reply. Then what do I owe this honor, pretender? Have you come to kill me as your heroine would have? Shall I fear you as my grandfather did her? You are but a boy who still sits on his father's knee. Raffi's tone was listless, almost disinterested, but her words stung him like a lash of thorns. I come to warn you once. Stay out of my way. A moment of stunned silence gripped the triad of men after she finished speaking. Then Ren unleashed a bellow of laughter, laced with both disbelief and insulted wrath. He gestured at her weapon. As I said before, that is a beautiful sword, pretender. We shall see if you know how to use it. Raffi's only sign of response now came in the form of a slightly raised eyebrow. Very well, Ren said. You have come to live out a fantasy, so I grant you a small kindness before you die an impostor's death. You will fight in the old way, a tribute to the warrior you so foolishly costume yourself to be. Ren gestured back to his two men, and each put aside their firearms, reached back to the wall, and drew long katana blades that rang out against their sheaths. Kill her. With a frenzy of sudden movement, the first guard dashed towards her, his voice rising in the grunt of a crescendo. He was a hulking figure, threefold taller than she, a bruiser whose arms practically burst out of the sleeves of his black designer suit. The man grinned as he came, coiling his sword back like the strike of a venomous snake. But Raffi was no mere snake. She was a dragon, a shadow. She would devour the snake. She was a killer. In one quick flash, the sound of steel slicing flesh ripped through the air with a brief touch of wind. It was a draw so fast, so brutally efficient, that by the time the man realized he had been cut, Raffi's blade had already been resheathed at her hip. The guard stopped, his facial features bulging, and the veins of his neck thrombosed in strain. A beat, more like a moment within a moment, came and went before a sickening sound sputtered out from his mouth with a nauseating wet chortle. Then came a thick, bubbling choke, quickly interrupted by a spray of crimson that shot from his neck like a severed pipe. Ren's face dropped. Raffi hardly moved as the spray covered her face. barely edging her chin high enough to keep blood from covering her eyes. Her drifting attention found the little crime prince, who tried to form words to cry out to his second guard, but nothing came from his breathless, quivering lips. Seeing his distress and feeling plenty of his own, the remaining guard lunged. He was more artful than the first, less a swordsman of strength, more a man of style and finesse. But his training had failed him. Raffi saw a foundation of flourish and dust where both structure and steel should have been before her. He was a quicker opponent, smaller and more agile, but no less threatening than the first. Another blinding movement from Raffi wrought another quick and nigh imperceivable strike with her now glowing samurai blade, which she then held out to the side, allowing herself a moment of serene breath. The second man froze, as if not sure precisely what happened. Then, as he took in a deep breath, a pained gasp accompanied a horror he now found within his circumstance. He dropped his blade from its raised position high above his head, and high guard in preparation for a strike he'd never deliver. He looked down, watching a wet slick of red move slowly outward from the lower center of his gut, soaking the white of his shirt through a thin perforation under his belly button. Raffi twisted her sword and sheathed it, her once brown retinas glowing an otherworldly blue. Ren, who now looked equally terrified and disturbed, lost all the colour in his face. Gone was Raffi's veneer of indifference. She had become a calm sea, blanketing soul spitting darkness, an almost primal force so fierce that it sent a cold burn down the prince's back that he feared would freeze his veins into his skin and set his heart to ice. Still staring at Ren, Raffi reached into her dying foe's fresh wound and, with a single grotesque thrust of her hands, tore out his intestines. Ren screamed, the last semblance of his composure melting away in visceral horror. Raffi cast the entrails at the feet of the upstart with a sickening plop that accompanied her second attacker's last collapse. Young Shimizu shrunk, a shadow of who he'd been just moments ago, and sat upon his fancy cushion agape at the visceral gore that painted the floors, tables, and walls of the private room he'd so deliberately staged. He stammered as his whole body quivered. "Now," Raffi interrupted softly, her voice clicking through her hushed Kensai Ben, "let me repeat myself one more time for the sake of clarity. You will forget the raider. They are my business, and you will not interfere. If you get in my way, should I even hear you stir, then I shall have no choice but to visit again." Raffi stepped towards Ren, slowly and deliberately, and he flinched in distress. His breathing had become laboured, sweat beading at his brow and dripping from his upper lip. I will do as you say." Ren cleared his throat. The raider. What do you want with him?" Raffi picked up a fine woven napkin from the table and delicately wiped the blood from her hands and face before turning towards the door. "Who said anything about him?" Raffi said. She shut the door behind her leaving the man